Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes.
Kristen, if I was to ask you what social capital means, how would you define it?
It is who you know and how well you work together.
Yeah, it's such an interesting concept, because I've been digging into it as a view that social capital doesn't exist in isolation. It's about relationships, and capital, if you think about it in investing terms, is money, is value, and it is the value of the combination of those relationships and the value you create, which I think makes it a really well-labeled term.
I've been thinking about two things there. One is it makes the world go round. To your point, we don't operate in isolation. Nowhere can we do things entirely on our own, and that includes the workplace as well. And the second, it's kind of like a bank account. When you are building social capital, you're depositing, and so when you need something from someone else, you simply withdraw. But then when you go into overdraft, it's kind of time to start building your social capital up again.
I actually think now you've talked about it like that actually makes me think this is a particularly good topic for women who are socialized to think we have to do everything ourselves. A lot of us feel like, martyrdom, that we have to run everything. We have to take control of everything. We are not successful unless we've got everything under control and our own. And social capital as a concept completely defies that. It is about you are actually not that valuable on your own, and the value comes from how you interact with others and what you can create together.
Yeah. And if we think about, do you remember that one time we went on a business trip and we went into a communal living environment?
Oh,
and everyone, remember? And
yes.
Everyone had their individual homes, but then there were all these places where people could eat together and care for one another's children. There was a shared garden. There were like shared chores and tools and all of that stuff. And that is probably a great representation of social capital, that we do not live in isolation. They just happen to have a formalized structure for sharing. And social capital is a little bit invisible in the workplace. But if you think about it, we have to all work in that way to get stuff done.
Yeah, and this kind of falls under our theme, actually under a lot of themes. It's about personal branding, because it is about your reputation, but it also is a lot about influence. And we've spoken in the last couple of weeks and deep dived into influencing a bit, and that often people fall back to, when they're trying to negotiate or influence, to bribes, effectively. This idea of, I'll pay you, or what can I do to get those backstage tickets? Social capital is the antidote to that. It is the ability to have those social structures and have built those relationships, to have people to want to do stuff for you or to see value in doing stuff for you, and vice versa.
I love it because it's like social capital is the antidote to fraudulent behavior, to
well, it's not. I mean, maybe legal bribes, but that idea of that transactional. Maybe social capital is the antidote to transactional relationships, because it's this idea of you don't have to reciprocate straight away. It's not like, I'll do this for you if you do something for me. It's like this. What is it that everything sort of just lines up over time?
Yeah, it's
What's
greasing.
What's that word for that?
Greasing the palms. I don't know.
Swings and roundabouts.
We're greasing people's palms, which I love. But look, if you've built good relationships at work, it's easier to ask for help or collaborate on a project. And again, I go back to that communal living. When you've built these really close relationships with your neighbors, it's so easy to say, I have to hop out. Would you watch my child? Or would you help me with this recipe? Or oops, I need some eggs. And the thing is that should be happening at work. And because it's so invisible, that sometimes, yes, we resort to the wrong things. Either we take everything on and do it ourselves because we think we have to, and we don't delegate or ask for help. Or we, like you said, the expectation is that people should help us. Whereas really, if you have a bunch of deposits in your bank account, it's much easier to get people to help you out to what you need to do, get done.
As I've been watching Game of Thrones, think of your social capital bank like the Iron Bank. I'm just learning about the Iron Bank that secretly controls it all, which is probably true. Social capital is the secret weapon that controls it all. And I just thought, is it worth digging a little bit into, because there's that concept of the relationships and the value you create, but it is very intrinsically linked with reputation, which in my opinion is best summarized by what people say about you when you're not around. And often we have, because we all have to stereotype and we all have biases and we all have to work through all sorts of information every day, when we think about people, we tend to not necessarily put them in a bucket, but you get known for a couple of things. And you get, like, we will often have these conversations if we're recommending people for a role or thinking about what someone's strengths are. We can immediately point to, they are great at X, or I would put them in this situation, but not this situation. That's kind of your professional reputation.
Yeah.
And that is what drives your social capital.
100% personal brand. It's being known for your strengths and superpowers. It's helping out. It's that idea of reciprocity and helping others out and using your strengths and superpowers, which means when an opportunity comes up, they're recommending you because they know what you're good at and you've probably helped them out at one point. So they're really happy to put you forward. In fact, I think we can use a lot of examples of what this looks like. For example, your ideas can get fast tracked at work. Like decisions get made a lot quicker because of your reputation. Like this is the importance of it. Trust shortcuts. Like, you know how you're like, oh, if so-and-so thinks it's good, I'm good. Like you trust others' decision-making abilities. And so you're in on that project or that decision because so-and-so said it's good. You've got that trust in that person. Things like, if opportunities find you, has that ever happened? You've been shoulder tapped for something instead of you hunting them down. That's thanks to social capital. And then often just things get done faster. Like you ask for one thing and it gets done as opposed to chasing people. That again, all social capital.
Yeah, and I feel like if we give some examples of each of those, like I was thinking there's a couple that immediately spring to mind, but we talk a lot about visibility and personal brand that's led by you and the words you say. So your elevator pitch, the way you update people, the way you present yourself, like all of that stuff, amazing. And it's a really tangible way to build that social capital and your reputation. The flip side of that is also the actions. So like getting your ideas fast tracked. I can think of a couple of people we know who, if they have an idea for a brand or an idea for a product, I would back it because they have such a history of creating those things and being very successful in creating those things. So they're not starting from the same start line as anyone else when they suggest something. You immediately go, that idea is going to get fast tracked because you have a reputation for being really good at that. And then the same with the trust shortcuts. And almost a year in, we're coming up to our first year anniversary of our membership network. I'm finding it really fascinating to see we've got some fabulous partners on board, some organizations who really back us. We're starting to name drop them because I have noticed if we say, for example, Fonterra backs us and has come on as a customer, or all these amazing energy companies, these great banks, whatever it is, people go, oh, if they back them, I should back them. Immediate shortcut for us. And that's the same professionally as well.
Yeah. Can you think of an example that's worked for you with social capital?
I mean, I'm thinking purely from a Power Suit perspective right now, but we had a pretty big opportunity land in our inbox on Friday. And I was sort of scratching my head to go, where did that come from? And I think maybe that explains it all. Is like, it's not even direct anymore, that people are talking about us behind our backs in the nicest possible way. And the word about what we do is spreading to the point that we now have people we've never spoken to or don't have a direct connection that we can point to, coming to us saying, we know you're really good at this and we want to do that. And I think that's on a business sense with Power Suit. I can probably rummage one up, but do you have one?
Well, I just would love, because I think Power Suit's a great example. So the first thing is we built something from nothing, which is hard because you don't have
no social capital.
We had no track record of the something, right?
Yeah.
But our respective reputations, we were able to ask for help because we'd built relationships. We'd taken the time to reach out to connections and build, and years before, right? Like not immediately when we needed something, but we'd nurtured relationships and our networks as a result. So networking, part of social capital. And then I think we have a lot of generosity in time. We made sure that if people people needed something, we were really happy to coach. Like we still do 15-minute calls with everyone who signs up to our newsletter or they get that opportunity, right? That, in my opinion, is quite generous because we are there giving our time and our expertise to help others. Like we genuinely go into
in our
those
opinion,
calls.
we're generous, but it is actually, you're right. It's not, it's just something that's in our DNA of this is how we like to do things.
Yes.
And again, that points to the reputation. There is no artificial thing here. We are true to our values. We add to it. And over time, and I think this is a key thing, it takes time. Like we're a year in, and I think PowerSuit's such a great example because it was a cold start with a little bit of our own reputations brought in. But it's taken a year, and I keep talking about it as the handbrake coming off, to move from what are you and what are you doing and why should I trust you and what makes you different to having an impact that is tangible enough that people are talking about it. And if you think about that in your own career, and we often talk about this with job hunting or promotions, we focus on that one performance review each year, or oh my goodness, I think I'm ready to start looking for a job. How do I go about it? Whereas if you actually keep doing this practice throughout your career, you've given yourself a massive head start because you've built that social capital long before you need it. So doors open when you need them to open rather than having that cold start. That's what effectively people are doing, is giving themselves a cold start like the starting of a business just when they actually need that social capital to pay dividends.
Yeah. Go, another money reference.
Thank
Good
you.
one.
I tried that. I just got it off the top of my head and I was like, hopefully you pick this up.
This is you're going in with flush with deposits. And so you can have a season in your life where you just need withdrawals. And this can happen when you're seeking a new job, when you're looking for a new opportunity, when you need help in a crisis. You thankfully have built up those deposits so you can start making withdrawals. If, I just want to kind of back it up because I love backing it up with a little bit of research, that if it's not just us convincing others, but Harvard Business Review found that people with strong social capital, this is something that can be measured, have 3 times the promotion rate of those that don't. And again, all that means you do not need to be special, popular. Let's talk about bias in a minute here. You do not have to be the loudest person in the room or have the most LinkedIn connections. And you don't need to be working every room and totally self-promoting. Those are all myths. That's not about this. This is your consistency in who you are and how you show up, your generosity to others, your willingness to support and help. Like, it is something that we can all do every day. We probably do. And to start to notice those things. And for those that are feeling, well, I'm remote or I'm hybrid, it's really hard to do, I'm just surviving here. An MIT study found that those, again, with social capital, remote workers had 40% better career momentum thanks to social capital. So the ability to notice if someone is in need, where you can lend a hand to something using your strengths and superpowers, that will come back tenfold.
Yeah, and I think you said in there consistency, and that to me feels like the key here. And we've talked a lot about understanding your unique leadership identity, knowing your strengths and superpowers, but consistency is a key part here too, because I can think of some examples in our life and these are some of our bugbears, and this really relates to your social capital. People who ask us for a favor and then put the work on us. So, hey, could you come and do this thing? Oh, and can you also book the invite, or can you come to wherever I am to make it? And the social capital withdrawal there is that we're like, you are calling on us to put in the effort for your thing. And if you are consistently doing that, that spreads, and vice versa. I know people, and especially last week when I was in a bit of a pickle, people I knew I could call on and who would drop everything to help. And that social capital deposit is just like, that's $1 million deposit, really, if you think about it. And it's consistent. It's not sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not, because we all know those people where you can't quite rely on them. So it is, you are consistent with your behavior. And if it's consistently poor, you will be known for that, but at least people know what they can call on.
Reliability.
Where if it's inconsistent, you actually have a muddied brand, much like if Coke's recipe was different every time they made it. No one knows what to expect. You're sort of nothing to anyone. So
you know what? That's the cancel people. Remember, we've talked a few times about like this idea of like constantly saying you're going to do stuff and then canceling.
Yes.
This is like the cancel people. It's like, you're just going to cancel. So like, I'm depleted. Like, for me to waste my time and energy and back and forth when you're not going to show just sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
You know,
that how you treat people thing. Yeah.
yeah. You know what we should just quickly chat to, because I promised we would. And this is bias, because I think it is a thing. Like we're navigating a knife's edge of like being too promotional or being overly this or that or not enough this. And so we get harmed in terms of our reputation, thanks to bias. Secondly, we're often not in the places in order where some social capital is built. Let's talk about golfing and networking, and then we may not have alliances. I think there's ways, of course, to navigate bias, but there is actually this whole concept of likability versus competence bias associated with social capital. Still, would you not agree?
Yes, likability. Yes. And actually I think the likability, if we can rename that or push it a little bit to more respectability, it will work really well for women, because likability is something you can't really control. And like, people often talk about Meghan Markle. I don't want to walk into a snake pit here. A lot of people don't find her very likable. And that means that it's undermined, and this, again, social capital, it's undermined a lot of the messages that or probably a very truthful accounting of her experience of walking into the royal family. If we respected her, I think that would look quite different. And I think respect is, I back that you've had a really solid career, that you've added value, that you have been an overall good person. It doesn't really matter if you're not cute and charming in the moment. So I think that can be a nice sidestep for women.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a few others that we talk a lot about at PowerSuit. And another one of that is documenting your own wins and making sure you're sharing them. Because I think, how we're building up, that's that personal brand thing. If no one else is noticing your wins, because that is how you can build social capital. I don't mean in a self-promotional way, but in a way of like, oh, that person's really good at that, or they delivered this incredible thing. They can probably do it for you too. Or so I think the documenting of your wins and subtly putting them into your elevator pitch or in through conversation. Oh, I did that last week. I would love to help show you how, or I can help you with that as well. I think documentation is really important. And then the one thing I know, Nat, we talk about a lot is don't change the wine, but change the wine label. So, when you and I go into, it could be heavily male dominated environment, or could be overly, sports environment, or a very posh environment. Like we are tailoring our communication. We're sensitive to the social norms of that space. Fitting in isn't a terrible thing while still being true to yourself and who you are.
Yeah, and it was actually interesting because I've had and we talk about this a bit. I've had a few Zoom calls. Let's talk about Zoom calls, because we work from home, and part of my reputation that I'm trying to build is as an athlete. No, but part of who we are and our personal brand is being really real and work fitting around us and really creating smart ways to work rather than running ourselves ragged. And so a couple of weeks ago, I came in from a run, #humble brag, but I'd had half an hour. So dropped after one meeting, ran literally out the door, ran around circles for half an hour, came straight back in onto another meeting. And I apologized, saying, oh my goodness, I'm red and sweaty. And she kind of looked blankly at me and went, but isn't that who you are? That you are fitting work around other stuff as well, and you celebrate that. Why are you apologizing for it? And that was a great example of me not being true to who I was and apologizing for something that was a thing that I should feel really comfortable with. But if I was to take that same approach when we go on and present in front of people, I would be absolutely showering and changing first. I think that's you don't need to, and I think that's such a nuanced line, but you don't need to change who you are, but you have to be really respectful of the situation that you're in.
That's it. And tailoring. So I love the wine and wine label analogy. And just another couple quick things is, on our terms, like we can't always make the golfing or the networking, and we shouldn't. We should be able to create visibility on our terms. And we've gotten quite good with, I suppose LinkedIn a little bit, but also I think even in your workplace, you can actually, instead of sharing those insights, because you can't happen to make the all hands meeting or the after work this or that, you can actually write an email. Like of your written insights. I'm not able to attend this thing because I've got a sick child, or I'm away at something this day. I'm just going to share with you a few of my thoughts. Like I think we can still share our insights, superpowers and strengths on our terms. And then the last thing is we're huge fans of building alliances and sponsors, even if they're informal. I think that's also critical to social capital, because I was once told sometimes it's not what you say, it's who says it. And so for us to sell up an idea to really influential people, for example, sometimes we're the wrong people to deliver the message. And if we had an informal sponsor, they say it, it's got so much more weight because they might have more social capital within those circles. So I guess I'm just trying to say, start to curate your sponsors and informal sponsors in your workplace as well, who can speak on your
intentional. And I feel like when we talk about building these relationships and building that reputation, I think a couple of the keywords have come through chatting about it is authenticity and consistency.
Consistency, yeah.
And reciprocity. Yeah, I think those are big ones. And so like talking about sponsors, and this is something that I found with all these 15-minute calls we do, we are really there on the team for whoever we're speaking to. We are actively listening. We are finding opportunities to ask questions and maybe offer support, like a connection. And it's amazing. And this is such an easy example. The difference between people who are really thoughtful and go, wow, this is such a cool opportunity to have this time to be able to get some investment in my career. I really respect that. And people who are still like, oh, I'm busy, or don't turn up, and then don't even tell you they're not going to turn up. And that is such an easy example of when you're building these relationships and trying to find these informal or formal sponsors. Consistency, respect, thinking through that reciprocity thing, and just making sure you are acting according to your values, because it's so easy in a very busy, chaotic world to not be consistent, to turn up late, to cancel, and those actions all do add up. So it's like, often it is the little things rather than the big things as well. I just wanted to make that clear as well, that it's like just being a good human, like sending a note to someone when they've said something really good in a meeting, making sure you credit people for their ideas, stuff like that builds reputations really well. And it's not big and shiny.
No, it doesn't have to be huge, displays of generosity. In fact, these small little things work, which is why it's so perfect for women and Power Suit that people can do small things this week. So Nat, can you think of it? You've mentioned a couple, but can you think of one thing that someone might try this week in order to build? I can share just very quickly first. Think about someone that is in need right now, and then make an introduction that matters. Think about someone that might be job hunting, that might be wanting to learn something new, that is struggling with something, that is looking to solve a problem. Think about an introduction that matters to that person, or someone you know that's been through this, and make an introduction.
I love it. And if someone does make an introduction, I think the flip side, if you are thinking about your reputation, follow through, because that person is invested in you. And it's so easy to go, oh, I was too busy to follow up with them.
That's embarrassing.
You can immediately see what someone has just witnessed from your side if you follow through, if someone does something like that for you. The other one that we've noticed a lot on PowerSuit recently is we're trying to build a culture of sharing wins, of people really celebrating success in a week. Firstly, on their own list, stopping at the end of every week and thinking about things that went well, but then to publicly share it so we can all celebrate together, because we know how important those dopamine hits are for changing the wiring in our brain to focus more on positives and to build momentum and motivation. What we find is that people still feel a bit nervous about sharing their win. And what our fabulous community manager has started to do is start to share them on people's behalves. And I just loved this as an example of, if someone tells you something fabulous they did that week, sometimes it's good to share that and publicly acknowledge that they've done something pretty amazing, and obviously within the right context. But like, that is such an easy thing to do to make someone feel really good about themselves.
I agree. And on a public forum, and if be it a Teams or Slack or whatever your team is, if there's not a celebration channel, make one. Or if there's a general channel, publicly acknowledge someone that's done something amazing on your team, your colleague, whatever it is. No one is going to go, oh, that's awkward. I think it's amazing. It's an amazing thing to do. I do have a quote as we wrap up. Okay. And this is one from Tim Sanders, who is ex-Yahoo. He's a New York Times columnist and an author and a leadership speaker. And I really like this one because it supports the idea of social capital. And this is, your network is your net worth.
I so agree. And I actually think watch this space in PowerSuit because our network is starting to connect us in with some pretty incredible people who we're starting to bring in to do interviews and mini masterclasses on the network. So that rings particularly true right now to me that, wow, it's amazing what your network can do for you.
Yay. I love that we left people to a couple actions as well. So build the deposits in your value bank. And so think about celebrating someone else's win and think about introducing someone to someone to solve their problem, to help them out, to support them.
And be consistent. Don't cancel last minute or not turn up or not follow up on things like that stuff. What is it? Trust is built with 1,000 actions and lost in one.
Yeah.
That stuff is killer to your reputation.
We've all been on the other side of being let down. So something good to keep in mind. And we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.